guy. His great quote that I will remember. He says, "In what was that? I will remember now. I can't remember. In the I want to say for some reason Machiavelli comes up, but it's like he says, in the Machiavelli sense, I am the suffering man." And I said, wow, how could a 1960s successful, he would, he'd be like the great conglomerator now. Um, he started all that stuff.
So you collect art, and Lord knows you did pretty well on that butcher paper thing.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is, have you ever been
And,
tempted?
and like that. You know how much I paid for that? In Africa, though.
Yeah.
And I had to, but the
And
guy,
it cost you more to get it here than to buy it?
no. When the guy quoted me the price, I said, does that include shipping? Caught him off guard. He said, yeah. And I know it did, I know he didn't make
Well,
any
what'd you
money
pay?
on that. $2,800. And that was in the year Notre Dame burned, 2018.
Oh, really?
Because I was
you
in
were there.
I was in Harare when reading about the cathedral burning in Paris.
So, but when it comes to art, I mean, for instance, that butcher
That
paper
that
there,
that painting
Is it-
that piece right there right now
Yeah.
is worth $100,000.
So, and that's because the guy has a name. That he has
He
a pedigree. of
he
some
has
sort.
a name, but it is such a unique piece of art
If it had been his only one, huh?
outside of Africa.
Okay, all right.
It's so heavy. It's so and it's this they call that, and don't ask me why. They call that serpentine marble, and it's unique to a certain quarry very near where Rhodes hung out in Bulawayo, southern Rhodesia, which is now called Zimbabwe.
I
And
want everyone to know I went to the San Diego Zoo once. I did. I went to the San Diego Zoo. Go ahead.
oh, that's right. We were on. I forgot we're on
Screw
tape.
your
Yeah.
Zimbabwe. I went to San Diego Zoo.
But I mean, that. I mean that. I can't afford, to buy art from galleries.
Yeah.
It's just that's something that corporations do it
Yeah,
for their
yeah,
execs,
yeah.
and they write it off,
Of course.
and then they pass title to the exec's family, sort of thing. Like all of it. I had a partner in an oil man in Texas. In the first years, I started going to Nigeria, and he did a lot of crude lifting, and I was helpful to
Crude
him.
lifting. Oil you're talking about?
Crude oil lifting,
Okay.
yeah.
Lifting meaning like out of the ground or to the gas station?
Lifting means getting the fueling station where all the crude is brought in by pipeline,
The
hooked up
processing
to
plant.
your
Oh.
vessel and filled up with generally on the super tankers 2 million barrels of crude oil. And so very valuable cargo coming across the Atlantic to refineries on the Gulf Coast, the East Coast. We don't get that much crude around to Long Beach or to San Pedro, but when we can, they have to go a little smaller vessels through the Panama Canal.
And there are
But
pipelines
it's great.
that snake and go all over the place.
Oh
too.
yeah. And that's a big issue in American politics
Yeah.
because the
They put them-
Canadian
yeah.
Canadian tar sands
They figured
to
out
Galveston
how
Bay.
They figured out how
Yeah.
to get the oil out of them. And,
Right.
and, yeah.
But you have to cross native lands, and that becomes controversial.
You lawyers love that sort of thing.
It becomes political, where Republicans want to do it. But if they don't get it done and the Democratic administration comes in, they kill it. Yeah. And so, it's a
Have you
big
ever
deal.
been tempted? That's my question. Have you ever been tempted to invest in the super fine art that you can't afford, but you can
No.
get a little piece of it?
No.
That's not something.
Be part of a syndicate.
Yeah.
I want to. My touchstone for collecting art, the criteria is I have to like it. I have to like it, and fortunately, I think I have impeccable taste, and so it's like, I mean, this has been since high school.
Or whatever your taste is, you want that art.
I always came down on the side of what eventually became the most expensive example of that art, and so I have to get it early. I have to get it in weird places, like in foreign countries, and secondhand stores. My wife is a master at that.
You often hear about the thrift shop
Right.
that's
Right.
got something in it that is
Right.
extremely valuable and nobody knew, and then
Or
somebody
the-
smart comes along. And
Or one of the
grabs it.
original 4 copies of the Declaration of Independence on the back of a painting in Summerland, just south of Santa Barbara up the coast. Who knew? I think he bought the painting for $80.
All right. So here we
For
go.
for the frame,
To set
not
the-
for the
To
painting.
set the stage here, I don't know whether this is what we just talked about makes it in the final cut, but regardless, the purpose of us being here today is that I found what did I find? I found an outline of the various topics that you might talk about if you're going to do a video biography. And this is not a biography of me or my friend Stan, but it's 2 former roommates, 50 years estranged, back together again, and we're kind of sharing our lives and what we've learned at 83 and 82. And today's topic is childhood years. So Stan, when
Let's start at number 1.
when and where were you born? When and where were you born?
I was born on a Sunday morning in August in Los Angeles, California, in the house in Watts at 9328 Compton Avenue at 8 a.m. in the
How
morning.
many years you lived there?
I still own the house.
Still in the house.
Still own the
Of
house.
course you did.
I lived there until my second year of marriage to Phyllis, the mother of my 2 sons.
And you would
When-
have been what age?
I would have been 1969, 1970. But from 1959, when I left there
For college.
for Whittier College,
Yeah.
where we became roommates, I did not live there until 1968, when I graduated from law school. But that was always home. And before I got married, that's where I had a bed there. And my mother had passed away in 1963. My father actually lived in the house.
63, she passed away.
She passed away 6 months after
How old was
I
she?
graduated from Whittier College. She was 66 at the time of her death.
And how much longer did your dad live?
He lived 12 years, 10 years longer. He passed away in 1973 at the age of 78.
So help me. How did he make money? How did he? And because your mom didn't work, and you
Right.
had what, 4 kids in the family?
Right.
And so she was a stay-at-home mom. That was typical of the day.
Correct.
And your dad
We was a garbage man. That's how
what I thought.
That's how we referred
And
to him, as
yeah.
a garbage man. But in the city, a municipal worker in the sanitation department for the city of Los
Okay,
Angeles.
so he had what do
That
you
was
call
his principal job,
okay.
and that's the one he
it? What about
retired
the
from.
second one?
He was a janitor at Stauffer Chemicals, and
That'll kill you.
my first lecture, the first lecture I attended at Whittier College was in Stauffer Hall,
Stauffer Hall.
named for John Stauffer.
Albert Upton.
You know,
I listened to him.
basic communications.
It was a revolutionary course.
That's right.
And I'm not sure it revolutionized me, but we
Well,
all took it.
but we didn't understand it
No.
at the time. You know, that was great.
But it was really cutting edge.
Well, we didn't know what a metaphor was,
Yeah,
and it
but we
didn't
learned.
kind of make sense.
Yeah.
Well, is it a simile? Is it an analogy? Is it a parallel? What is a metaphor? You know, and to this day, you know, you're not quite sure.
Well, in '63, I remember standing on the steps of Stauffer Hall at Whittier College and listening to the national anthem. And it was played over the radio, and someone had not broken in, but had kind of stuck their head in the door of a history class I was taking with Nuttall, American history class,
Wow.
and said the president has been shot. And I found out Kennedy was dead on the steps of Stauffer Hall, not from a newscast, but I heard the national anthem being played, and I knew he was
Wow.
gone.
Quite a contrast.
Yeah.
I was in my room at Oxford, in
'63?
in 1963, in December of
Wait.
1963.
But you graduated after I did.
No, I graduated before you did, because you stuck around.
Oh, okay, that's right.
With your
I was
girlfriend.
different, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm class of '63 at Whittier College,
Yeah.
and two of my Rhodes Scholar classmates came into the room after dinner. It was about 7 o'clock in London, in Oxford.
Who was your dad's dad? Where did
Edwards.
Where did he grow up?
Edward Sanders.
And his firstborn was Ed, right?
His firstborn,
Wasn't Ed?
Hayes.
Hayes. Okay.
My father's first name was Hayes.
No. Your dad's firstborn.
My dad's firstborn was Hayes, right?
Oh, was Hayes.
Hayes Edward, right?
Okay.
But we called him Ed.
That's your brother?
That's my brother.
Oh.
In fact, we called him brother.
And he's
to
passed now?
He passed away in 1954, 2 years after the Olympics in Helsinki at age 24.
So that's Ed. We're talking Ed when you say
Right.
Hayes.
But Ed is named for his grandfather,
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Okay.
my dad's
I'll think
dad.
about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
who was a big guy, like my dad, and like Big Ed, my brother, and like me.
Yeah.
But the first Ed, who my grandfather Ed, who I never met, who died before I was born,
Okay.
was a big man, married 3 times, 19 children.
19 children.
And my father, Hayes, was his first son of the first marriage.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I think my father was probably named for Rutherford B. Hayes, who was president of the United States in 1876, in the great compromise of 1876,
Okay.
where the House of Representatives settled the
Right.
question.
Of the Western states being slave or not slave? Is that what you're
No,
talking-
that's the Missouri Compromise,
Okay.
or the Compromise of 1850. This was the end of Reconstruction.
Oh, okay.
Rutherford B. Hayes,
Post
you can be president, but you have to pull the Union troops out of the South, and it began the era of Jim Crow, of lynchings, and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keeping the black guy
Right.
down.
Which was
Because there was a short period of time when there were a lot of blacks who were elected, weren't they? To
right.
and
Oh, yeah,
there was a
the
brief
sen-
period of time, and
That's
then
right.
those folks said, "Well, we've had enough of this."
That's right. 1868, I think Hiram Johnson was a black man elected to the U.S. Senate from Mississippi.
And then Lincoln, after he was assassinated, his vice president wasn't he
Johnson from Tennessee.
And what were his biases?
He was a Southerner.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
He was a Southerner, and he wanted to pull the troops out of the South, even during his term in office, and the Republicans, the Thaddeus Stevens, and those guys said, no, you don't.
Yeah.
So they impeached him, but he wasn't convicted, like the modern president now. He was impeached, but he wasn't convicted.
But only once.
So he was only impeached once.
Yeah, this jackass has been.
He's impeached twice. Yeah.
Okay, so, and I was born in Huntington Park, California, Mission Hospital on Florence Avenue, right next to a Catholic church, St. Matthias Catholic Church. And just down the street was Salt Lake Park. And I remember as a boy going to the circus, the Clyde Beatty Circus at Salt Lake Park. And they actually had lions and tigers in a tent, in a cage. And Clyde came out, and he'd shoot his gun, and he'd crack his whip, and those lions knew what to do.
What year was that?
That had to be in the 50s.
No, what year were you born?
I was born in 1941. I was born to Minerva Constance Lindcourt, maiden name Thorson, Norwegian. She came from a large Norwegian farm family in upstate Wisconsin. Her mother was Ingeborg Jensen, and she became Ingeborg Thorson, and she was married to Tobias Thorson. Great names, Tobias.
How did she get to
Ingeborg
California?
Tobias. Well, that's a terrible story, but it's a story that I want everybody to know. I'm 83 years old, and I have never appreciated what my mom went through like I do now. Maybe it's because I'm retired and I have time to think about it, or maybe I was just so taken with myself I didn't think about it like I should have, because I wish I could have asked her more questions. And I guess I'd say to whoever might see this that ask the questions, have the difficult conversations, because there's going to be a time that you want to have them and you can't have them, and that's where I was. But the tragic story is simply this: my mom was 17 years old. I've got pictures of her that maybe I don't know that we can show.
Still in Wisconsin.
And she's in Wisconsin, and the doctor came out to the farm to make house call to the family. And in those days, you had diphtheria and you had typhoid. In 1 year, 4 of her siblings were buried from those kinds of disease.
Wow.
2 of them, one a baby and one an older person, in the same coffin. Anyway, the doctor...
And that would have included the Spanish flu epidemic?
I don't know what the cause of any of them was, but I those kinds of things were mentioned to me.
In 1918, 1919, 1921?
No. I'm talking about before 1910, probably, because she was born in 1903.
Okay.
And so.
But when she was 17,
when she was 17,
the Spanish flu epidemic was in full bloom.
Wasn't that 21 or something? I don't know.
Yeah,
In
20.
any case, the doctor took my mom to town. And I don't know whether she asked to go or whether he asked her. Don't know anything about that.
Was she sick?
I don't even know that. But what I do know is that 9 months later, she had his baby. He had raped her. He had a wife. He had 2 children, and my mom had his baby. Now, in those days, the baby stayed with mom in the hospital for about a week. After a week, that baby was taken from her. The baby was taken from her. And she left in disgrace. My mother left in disgrace as a 17-year-old raped.
She left the family.
She
She left the household. By
It
herself.
it wasn't her idea. She had an 8th grade education. She went as a au pair. I think that's a nanny. I don't even know what
Right.
an au pair is. That's a French word.
Au pair.
Au pair.
Au pair.
Thank you.
A lot of Norwegian, a lot of Scandinavian
Okay.
girls are au pair all
Yeah.
around the world.
She came with strangers. 8th grade education to La Jolla, California. 60 some years passed. She's now, my dad has had a stroke. My dad has had a stroke. He is, they're together in a home. He passes away, and then my mom is in a home, and she's in her 80s. She gets a phone call, and that phone call goes like this. Are you Minerva Lindquart? And my mom says yes. Are you in good health? My mom says yes. And are you sitting down? My mom says yes. He says to my mom, he says, I want you to know I'm your firstborn. I have flowers. And I want to visit. The first thing out of my mom's mouth to him on the telephone was, there's not a day in my life that I have not thought of you. Well, the rest is history. He had never had brothers, and we came to know him. His name is Wes Osland. He came to visit us. We went back to Wisconsin to visit his family, and we embraced him, etc. But here's the tagline to all of it. Wes also searched out the doctor's family, and they didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Did they acknowledge it?
I think they probably did, but they weren't interested.
Was there any contact that Wes had with his half brothers? Two half siblings?
I don't know that. And if he had had the sense to take a movie and tell us about that, we'd know. But we have the sense to be doing this so that
who would be your half siblings?
Right, and their children and their children's children. Your daughter was here just a few minutes ago. I heard about a couple of teenagers that are going to be chipmunks or something for Halloween.
Alvin.
And it's not so much that this is for them, it's going to be for their children and then their children. They've got the rock, the founding stone of the family is Stan. And what has flowed from that is just amazing. And we're going to chronicle a lot of that stuff. I wish I had better stuff to tell you, but he's going to tell you a whole bunch of super stuff. And you're gonna be you need to thank me. This was my idea. It wasn't
That's correct.
Stan's idea.
That's true.
It wasn't Stan's idea. And I just think if I was able to see my grandmother, born in 1875, talk about life between 1875 and when she had my father in 1898, talk about what life was like, what were the roads like, how did you get from here to there? Was it really horses or was it cars? When was it cars? I can remember Grandma talking about loving store-bought bread because all they had ever had all her life was homemade bread.
When did she live to?
Well, she lived until she died when I was at Whittier College, and that was in
1960s.
Around 60. So she's pretty old.
But she was born in 1875?
Her husband was. She was born in the 1870s, and I can't put an exact date on it. I'll try and have that for us later.
But so that means she would have been in her 80s,
Yeah.
late 80s,
Yeah.
when you were at Whittier College.
Yeah. She was the only grandparent that I had really had anything to do with. I do remember my grandpa Gene, her husband, who was French Canadian, but he had them. In those days, they called it. What did they call it? They didn't call it dementia. There was another name for it, but he was institutionalized at one point because he would wander, and he became mentally impaired.
They probably call it senility.
It was
senility. Senile. Yeah.
Senile.
Did your grandmother ever talk to your mother Minerva about the doctor who?
That's okay. I love this part. I love this part. I had no idea that any of this had happened until my mom. I went to visit my mom in the home, and she says, "I got a story to tell you, Richard." And she says, "Don't tell anybody, please. Don't tell anybody." I mean, she was still under the spell of what she had not done but had been punished for. Ah, boils me to the core to think that my mom went through that. My mom was a great cook. She was a feeder. She was a uniter. And I'm probably exaggerating all of this because of what I think about what she went through and how I experienced her. But she was, and I was a spoiled only child, and I was sort of under that burden. People would always talk about, "Oh, you're an only child," like, you
Well,
get.
but you weren't. I mean, you were the baby of the
But
family.
in all practical purpose, I was an only child because the other one was 17 years removed and on down the road and having his
Correct.
family and so forth.
Correct.
So I wasn't an only child.
You weren't, yeah.
But she had 3 sons and a daughter, a son and a daughter by Henry Cousins, a son that from rape, and then she married my father. I wanted to think about something. What did I want? I had something I was going to say about that. Maybe
And
we'll come back.
you're the only child between that father and Minerva.
Right. And I'm not certain of this. I'm certain that my dad and her, she had twins with my dad, but they were aborted in not because of their choice, but because of circumstances. If that hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't even be here talking about this. But
She
I don't know that.
miscarried.
She did, and she was 39 at the time. My dad was 43. Yeah. So
What-
that's my mom.
Did your mom, when she told you the story?
Oh, she said, "Don't tell anybody." Hell, I
That's
tell
right.
everybody.
And she swore you to secrecy.
Well, she
But
might
did-
have swore me, but I didn't listen.
But did she ever talk about her mother, and the separation when in?
She felt she had broke her mother's heart. That's what she said to me.
And Carrie had talked to her about this, didn't she?
Yeah, I wrote my thesis about her in undergrad. I wrote my thesis about my grandmother.
Did she object to, in effect, expelling
People
Minerva from the
No.
homestead in Wisconsin?
No, I think her mom was the one. My dad's mom talked about how she broke her mother's heart. So it's almost like right before my grandmother died, I asked her straight out. I was like, "Did he rape you? Did you have a crush on? Like what happened?" And she said, "I didn't know anything." That was her response to me. Was that exact phrase? I just didn't know anything. So she didn't, and I didn't know this, but she was going to die 2 days later. I didn't know how sick she was. But this time
From what?
pneumonia.
Oh! When you had this
Yeah, when I
conversation
had
with
this
her.
conversation with her,
Okay.
she
The old person's disease, as
Yeah,
they call it.
God,
The
that-
dying
that
person.
gets it.
Yeah,
That's how you
there's
go.
another name for pneumonia, but
she,
that's the last thing you get before you
Yeah.
die. Yeah.
she was sent away, and I think she felt like it was her fault,
Yeah.
and she felt like she had disappointed her mother.
Yeah.
But what you have to know about her mother had got married when she was 16, had 13 kids,
Hmm.
and Minerva was one of the youngest, and she died. Minerva's mother died when she was 61 or something. I mean, Ingeborg had a hard, short life. And anyway, so yeah, the story goes that it was like she had to be sent away.
Hmm.
Like her existence and that baby's existence
Was
so.
something that they could not live with
You
in
have to
Wisconsin.
imagine
Yeah.
Grantsburg is tiny. There aren't that many people. This guy's the doctor for the surrounding area. It had to all go away, I think.
Oh, here's the story I
But
wanted
she
to
did.
say.
But she wasn't able to take her baby with her.
had her baby for 2 weeks, and she told me the story. I have an image of it in my mind. She told me the story of the day that he was taken from her, and how totally heartbroken she was. I mean, she
Do you
had,
know if she gave him his name?
I think that, so the woman who raised him had a child, and that child died, a 2-year-old, a small child, and they gave Wes to her. There was no adoption. It was just like, here's your new baby.
Yeah.
Was her last his?
Oslin. Must have been Oslin.
It must have been Oslin.
Yeah. And she never told Wes that he was adopted. And he waited. He waited until she died.
Well, let me tell you that
to
story.
get in touch with my grandma.
Oh.
Because she just never told him that he was adopted, and he heard from other people
That he was adopted.
No, there's a more complete story. Well,
Go ahead.
All right, and the more complete story is this. First of all, I want you to know that Wes was in North Africa with Patton's army, and he had received the Bronze Star because when they went from North Africa to Italy, he had been in a scout plane which called in fire to a German battalion or regiment, or I don't know what to call it, in Italy, and he received the Bronze Star from it. I've seen it. In any case, his claim to fame with Patton is when he was in North Africa, this lieutenant drives up in a Jeep, and the lieutenant points at my brother Wes, and he says, "You come with me, soldier. You come with me." Wes gets in the Jeep. He doesn't know what's going on, and the lieutenant takes my brother Wes right to Patton, and Patton chews him a new asshole. He says, "Soldier, where is your helmet? Why are you not wearing a helmet?" I mean, that was Patton's style. He would do that, and you can just imagine how the word spread and everybody starts wearing their helmet because they don't want to get read out by General Patton. And Patton is probably one of the 2 or 3 most famous generals, along with Eisenhower and maybe Montgomery.
And George Washington.
I mean, he's big stuff.
General Sherman.
In any case, so my brother's home on leave, and my brother Wes is at a party. Not with the Thorsons. He has no idea. He thinks that I'm going to say Oslins. I suppose it must have been Oslins.
OSLEN.
OST LUND.
OST
And his
LUND. Oh, Oslund. Lund.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as part of the conversation at that gathering of what he figured was his mom and dad and the family, someone says in the conversation, I guess it was directed at Wes, because what Wes said to me was, at that party, Aunt so-and-so said to me, when your mother got you, and then went on and said whatever she said. Now, he just, that didn't make sense. You don't get a baby, you have a baby.
Right.
So he gets with his wife-to-be Jane in the car after the party, and he says, that's not right. That's not right. And as Carrie has just said, he did not say a word to what he thought was his mom and dad until they passed. And when they passed, he then went to the county, and there was no birth certificate. And so, and Carrie said it's a small community. And then he went to the adoption agency, and the lady came out. She had a folder, and she says, I just can't talk to you about this. I just can't. She put the folder down on the desk and left the room. Well, he dove in the folder, and the folder said, Baby Thorson. So now he has the name Thorson. So he goes to the Thorsons, and the first one he talks to, he says, oh, that's Minerva. She's in California. And then he calls the police department, and I guess they must have said Huntington Park. I don't know. That's where my mom lived. And they called the police department, and I guess they had lived there long enough, and maybe because of me, they said, oh, yeah, she's in Lemon Grove. And that's how he tracked her down and made that phone call. And boy.
And this is after he's served under General Patton in World War II. and gone
Oh,
through all of what
oh,
he's gone
wow,
through under the assumption that he was an Oslanen,
yeah,
but he was actually a Thorson.
he was a Thorson.
And do you know what the family name of the doctor?
I don't. I would like to find that out.
We have it. Adolf was his first name, and we have articles.
But it wasn't Hitler, was it? Yeah, well, Hitler was probably a better person.
But if his first name was Adolf, he probably was Bavarian, huh? German, yeah, from a Bavarian family.
I'm so glad. I don't think I knew until recently that was your part of your college degree. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah.
Anyway.
Well, very, very different origins than me. My mother was born on, she was the 8th of 9 children, born on a homestead
in Texas.
in South Texas, Frio County, that had been homesteaded in 1873. Her mother, my grandmother, Maggie, was the daughter of the son of the plantation owner and a little slave girl by the name of Winifred. And
God.
so my feeling is, if I haven't said this on tape before, is that my grandmother was fair-skinned enough to negotiate with the homestead office to get 4 allotments, 40 acres each, 160 acres. And those 160 acres
are still in the family.
and I manage them in Frio County. And I was just there. I took my 3 grandsons there, and I owe my 4 granddaughters the same trip. Although, at least 2 of them have already seen it. My daughter and her 2 daughters have actually gone to the property and taken pictures and so forth. So I took the 3 grandsons, their cousins, and so there are 2 granddaughters who haven't seen it yet. Those granddaughters of Ed and Justin, those daughters of Ed and Justin. But then during the so-called Great Migration, when blacks were leaving the South,
down Route 66.
Route 66, yes, but also if you came to California, so you didn't pick up Route 66
Oh, really?
probably until you got to Albuquerque or to El Paso.
Okay. All right.
And so you came out of Texas. She came out of what is southern Texas, Tex-Mex,
Okay.
and to California. She came to Santa Monica, California, with her mother and her sister. And Maggie at that point was getting up in age. We're talking now 1922.
Okay.
This is right during that Great Migration,
All right.
when a lot of blacks are moving out. Maggie is a very stern, very disciplinarian, and so even as a grown woman, my mother was born in 1898. In 1922, she was 24 years old, but she felt obligated to stay with her mother and to take care of her mother.
So there are 3 women no men, just 3 women.
They joined the men who were already
they
here.
They were already here.
The men had
prepared the way.
Been drafted into World War I.
Okay.
In 1916, 1917. And they served abroad, just like my father from the other side, from my father's side. They were actually soldiers. They didn't see combat though. And to the extent they saw combat, they saw combat under the French flag, not the American flag, because General Jack Pershing refused to have black Americans serve
Oh,
under
is
his
that
command.
right? Is that
And so the French said, well, if you don't want
We'll
them
take-
under
we'll
your
have
command,
them
we'll take
on
them.
down."
They can fight on our side. And so all of these black soldiers from World War I who got medals,
They were French ones.
they
huh?
were French medals, Legion of Honor. And so you see this and you see all these decorated medals. And you say, how did this happen? Well, the black soldiers in World War I, the American black soldiers in World War I, for the most part, served under the French flag. So back to Maggie. During the war, Maggie and her two daughters, Eva, my mother, and Bonnie, her sister, moved from the farm because the farm, 160 acres, is just too much for a woman and two teenage girls to handle. So they keep the farm, they pay the taxes, but they move first into Pearsall, the county seat, and then into San Antonio 2 years after that, and then they join the westward movement to California. Come to Santa Monica, my mother is introduced to my father by her brother, who was also a municipal employee in the sanitation department for the city of Los Angeles. And it was almost like an arranged marriage because that brother, Uncle Ulysses, my Uncle Ulysses, felt that his sister, who was 24, 25 years old, was going to be an old maid. And so he figured, let me make this pairing. And he did. And he paired both she and my her younger sister, my younger aunt, to men who they got married and stayed married to. My mother and father stayed married almost 50 years. And the bloodline, not to brag, but is very fine. There's never been a question about my paternity. There's never been a question about my maternity. My mother, I think, had only one man in her life. And quite frankly, I think my father only had one woman in his life for the duration. And so, not necessarily true for my generation.
Progeny,
Yeah, but so, and they had 5 children during the scarlet fever epidemic in the late 30s, early 40s. They lose their oldest child, Winifred, at 11 years old. And they decide they have 3 kids left, Ed, Donald, Margaret. And they decide, we want a 4th child. And so at the ripe age of 47 for my father,
Really?
44
That's getting
for
up
my
there in
mother.
those days.
I mean, she's right on the biological.
Yeah.
She gets pregnant. She loses that baby. She miscarries when she opens an old bottle of ammonia, which hadn't been opened. She's cleaning out a cabinet. She smelled it,
And that's
passed
all it
out,
took. And
she has to be taken to the hospital. That was a bird landing on the roof. And she gets out, tries again, and bingo, she's pregnant with me. And probably, I always say that I was conceived on the day the Japanese Empire bombed Pearl Harbor, which was December the 7th, 1941, because I was born August 9th, 1942, almost an exact, do the math, almost exactly 9 months later. So, yeah, that's my story. But I have another question about Minerva, and whether she disclosed what she told you and swore you to secrecy. Did she ever tell Norm that?
all of us. We all knew it. We all met Wes.
Did she tell them?
Uh,
Yes.
I don't
No.
know whether she was the first one to tell them, but and I don't know what questions they asked. So I don't know. I can't respond to that very well. But as I said, Wes in Mission Valley down in San Diego, and it wasn't immediately after that flower delivery, but some time later, rented some space in a hotel down there, and we all gathered. I've got pictures.
Yeah.
Everybody came, so everybody became very aware of the story. But
Who's everybody?
Helen, Norm, her children from Henry Cousins, me from Raymond Lincourt, and Wes, and his family I think came out also. I'm pretty sure about that.
The
James was there,
Oslins?
certainly. Not. I don't know about the Oslins
No, but his children.
because they had passed. Remember, he never dealt with what he was wondering about
Until they
passed.
died.
Until
Yeah.
they passed.
Right. And we don't know the last name of the physician.
Adolf is what
I have it. I have it somewhere.
Well, oh, you do know it. Yeah, you just can't recall it. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say something else and it just slipped me.
Have you ever been urged or motivated to find the progeny of Adolf's two sons?
No, I just like to have a conversation with Adolf. Yeah, that wouldn't have gone well. You know, I don't. You know, I understand stupid.
So
young people.
you haven't forgiven him.
No, I haven't. In fact, I guess I've never been enraged with him. But as I've gotten older, I have understood the burden that my mother, the life that she lived. The fact of the matter is,
But she lived. I mean, she kept living.
Yeah, but
She had
there-
what? She had 3 cousins and a Lincourt,
She had two cousins,
2 cousins.
and she had Oslin and then she had me. But my dad
Right.
was no prize.
But
my
I mean,
dad had a stroke.
after Oslin, she had 3 more kids
She did. I hear you.
and 2 marriages.
and great kids.
And she was a great mother.
Yeah, you need to be around more often. I guess I'm dwelling on the negatives and not the positives. because-
Well, the thing is, you know, what I'm learning as I live is that our origins, whether it was through accident, whether it was kind of an idyllic love relationship,
Yeah.
or whether it was forced, is kind of well.
beside the point. It's
It's almost beside the point.
Yeah.
It's almost beside the point.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
told you he's smarter than me, and it
You know?
kind of pisses me off. But that's
No, but I mean, because right now, you are carrying Minerva's burden.
I am.
If you don't forgive, if you don't let it go, it's like,
Well, you go
okay.
ahead and keep talking because I
My-
got a lot of problems. I'll be
Yeah.
calling. You.
I
You better
I had an older half sibling who I got to meet,
Okay, all right.
who told me war stories,
Yeah.
who
Who
You
are
know?
you talking about here?
we're talking about Wes.
Oh, I see. You're.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I it's sort of like Frederick Douglass. I mean, I had a little bit of information.
Well, but
that
when you
made
tell,
generalizations,
but look,
yeah.
if you tell me about Wes, couldn't you very easily say, well, you know, Stan, I had a half brother who served with Patton in Northern Africa. You know, I mean, and I'm thinking,
there's
well, how many people
Can
could
say
say that they met General Patton
Yeah.
and he told them,
Yeah.
what the hell, soldier, are you doing out here without your helmet on? You know, you get back to your barracks and you get that helmet. I mean, that's the kind of thing you include in your biography
Yeah.
or your autobiography. I mean, it's like me because I had to do, and all African Americans have to deal with how you deal with slavery and the slave past.
Oh.
Because
Oh.
my great grandmother was knocked up by a teenager
Yeah.
who was
For the fun of it.
for the hell of it.
Yeah.
Prob-
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
told,
Yeah. You might have.
why
you
don't
might
you
have a bigger reason.
why
than
don't
me
you
to-
go out to the barracks and practice? You know?
Yeah.
And he practiced on my great grandmother, 14 years old.
And she had a child.
She had my mother's mother, my grandmother, Maggie. And Maggie becomes Maggie's buried in Santa Monica. I decorate her grave every Memorial Day. And I've had the
And
privilege.
You don't think much about the guy either. do you?
Hey.
Hell no, that's a waste of time, isn't it?
I'm saying
What
like, well, you know, that says to me,
You might even say thank you.
I might. No, because if you believe in Darwinism, if you believe that there is a diversity imperative in the universe, in nature, that mixture of blood in 1857 gave me some immunities from allergies, gave me some physical attributes, size, heft,
In fact, you're carrying
bone
you're
density.
You're carrying that guy
You know,
with you.
and look at my complexion. I'm this beautiful bronze complexion. You know, not that I mind it if I was a beautiful ebony complexion, but I'm bronze, and I'm not going to walk away from that, Rich.
Yeah, I hear
I'm not going to say, oh, that son of a bitch slave owner, that teenager, who did he think he was?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I hear
jumping on my great grandmother.
called wisdom.
You know,
Yeah.
but so I'm thinking, you know, but that was a big relief for me when I found that story out. I walked around for a couple of years and I was pissed. And I was a grown man when I found that story out. I was living in this house, so it was within the last 45 years.
Well, and I've the rage that you've identified and experienced with me is recent. It's recent. It's recent, and I do appreciate the conversation because all the stuff you say makes true. It's not about, you know, you can dwell on the shit if you want to, but nobody cares, and you're the one that's going to be stinking. It ain't, you know, the past is the past.
And the fact of it, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Without knowing it, it's made you a better person. Because if Adolf was from Germany and Minerva traces her lineage back to Norway, at least you know that you're not the product of some inbreeding. You know, there's diversity there. Yes, you're both so-called Anglos,
And that's a
or
powerful
either Anglos or Saxons, because I know in Denmark I got in a conversation with one of the I think he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Denmark at the time, in a meeting in Copenhagen, where I said something about Anglo-Saxons, and he leaped on the fact that, whoa, the Anglos came from Denmark. The Saxons came from someplace else, you know. So Anglo-Saxon for me was an American term that he broke apart and said, who are you talking about? Are you talking? He would say to us in this conversation, you know, you're talking about the merger of two different bloodlines. And those kinds of things are important even now, a couple hundred years later, because all the stuff that we're talking about happened in the 1800s. in the case of your mom, in the early 20th century. And so, I just think it's it's a part of my philosophy of embracing our past and moving on, because the future is what we ought to be concerned with. And we see that in our presidential campaign race here in 2024. And it's so stark because one candidate wants to stay where we are, maybe even go back. And another candidate recognizes where we are and how we got here and wants to go forward. And the fact of the matter is, we don't have a choice. We're going forward. And we can either go forward with joy and love and a great appreciation for the expansion of our knowledge,
or we can
just kind of let things happen.
Simmer in the juices.
Stew in the hate. Stew in the fact that my mom was raped, that my great grandmother was raped, that so we move on. So and that's the beauty of talking about it. I mean,
great life lesson here.
If nothing else, this conversation that Rich and I are having about our origins may be worth the entire session. We don't know, because this is getting better and better.
But the fact is, we're probably both going to be dead in 10 years, and that probably not.
I won't.
All right,
because I'm living. My doctor, who's 92, is going to live to be 100, and we made a pact that if he lives to be 100, that we should get on the same track.
Yeah, I'm with you. I want to do that also. But here's the deal: we're both going to pass, and the people that I'm so eager to have see this are not your kids or their kids. It's their kids' kids, because you and I are going to die, but we're not, because the RNA and the DNA that is contained in us is going to be inside the people who will watch this, who have not been born yet. And he still owns the house that he was born in. He still owns the land that his ancestors before that. It's because of the intellect of the guy that raped his mother or grandmother,
great grandmother.
That DNA is in him. The good stuff, the bad stuff, whatever stuff. But listen, the people watching this, you need to live the kind of life he led in order to have the means, so that you can have the old homestead and the old home.
Well, you just heard from my daughter.
Yeah.
My daughter, who will turn 39 years old. I hope she doesn't mind me telling her age.
Doesn't look like that.
In a few weeks, did the research, and through her. No, on her mother's side.
Okay.
Found out that
Phyllis is your mom?
No, Melba is her mom.
Okay. All right.
With whom I was married for 21 years.
Gotcha.
And that marriage produced Alexandria, 39, and soon to be 39, now 38, and Chelsea, who just turned 36 last week, and they're the apple of my eye. And they found out with another cousin that their mother's great-grandfather was a pre-Confederate governor of the state of Alabama, whose son fathered a black child. Or is that right? No, whose daughter had a son with a black man.
Okay.
And that son, when he found out, had been passing for white. When that son found out that his father was black, ran away from home. And we just heard that story
Yeah, we did.
in the kitchen
Yeah.
of this house,
Yeah.
the patio from which we're doing this interview. And she told it, if not with pride, with a certain amount of pride in acknowledging it. And my daughter told the story as if this is me, you know.
Yeah.
If she can say that her great 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 grandfather was a white slave owner, then why can't we say that one of our ancestors was forcibly impregnated?
I think the lesson here is life is complicated. And if you're looking
That's
for
right.
a list of reasons to live your life one way, they're there. If you need a list of reasons to live your life another way, they're there. And you got to make the choice. But the choices that you make have consequences.
And I think make us stronger. At least the knowledge of the choices that were made and the outcomes make us stronger. When I think about what I knew in our Whittier College days, and how things happened,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
how transactions turned out, it's so totally different than what I know now, 60 years on, and how complicated, as you point out, it is. But unraveling that is how so empowering to the way we live our lives now. Sure, it makes you, from my standpoint, it makes me never want to die, which I think is very unnatural, because as you age, you say, wow, I'm getting tired of fighting these daily fights.
No.
You know, I'm aching, I'm this.
No.
But then you think to yourself, wow, I want to live.
It's so precious.
I want
Life
to
is so
live
precious.
to see Maeve's children.
Yeah.
I want to tell Maeve's children about Minerva.
And do I ever wish that Eugene and Carrie could have had this conversation and I could see it. Now, none of this was available to them, but it is now. And folks may look at this and just turn it off. I suggest you give it a chance, because I think you're going to enjoy it. What a wonderful conversation. And until next Thursday, adios, muchachos.
The next episode.
What a great conversation. Really good conversation.
Boy, that one got good, didn't
Yeah,
it,
that was-
Carrie?
that was-
Huh?
Yeah.
Did that get good?
That was really, really good.
Or what? Woo!